Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest rendition of the Nintendo Switch. With N64 games and Sega Genesis games on the way to the console's online platform, some of you may be taking a specifically retro look at this console saying, I love handheld gaming, I love these old titles, is it worth the upgrade to see some of these old games in a beautiful brand new screen? Well, I aim to answer that question in today's video because I've had the Nintendo Switch OLED since last week when it had launched, and this is my review today. For those of you looking for much more retro-themed content, it's on the way. We already have a ton on the channel right now for you to check out, so I encourage you to do so. And for those of you who are Golden Sun fans, don't worry, you don't gotta wait much longer. With that, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch OLED and my experience with it. First and foremost, this is a console upgrade for handheld gamers only. I primarily use my Switch in handheld mode. I know many others who do so, but I also know a lot of people who like to have it docked. And if you ask me, this is an upgrade for those who care a lot about handheld gaming because it brings me back to the Vita. Funny enough, they're doing the Vita in reverse, which was the Vita launched with an OLED screen in its original version and then moved to LCD when unfortunately they were not selling enough units because development costs for the game were as much as making a PS3 game, but the install base was much smaller, so everyone went and made games for the PS3 and the Vita was unfortunately abandoned. But the Vita was very far ahead of its time as well, and they were doing OLED gaming before anyone else. So if you have yet to experience a Vita, you don't know the greatness of OLED gaming, and the Switch is the perfect way to get into that. But I insist again, only look into this upgrade if you care about using your handheld, because otherwise it is pretty much the exact same Switch that you could buy on store shelves right now, or the same Switch Lite. There are some changes underneath the hood that we're going to talk about, but again, you need to love your handheld gaming to take full advantage of this $350 purchase. So as you can see here, we have the OLED screen, which is slightly bigger than the original Nintendo Switch screen. This does make a difference in my humble opinion. The colors are vibrant, extremely bright. It's such a sharp, beautiful looking screen. And as many have said online already, I don't know if any camera, any sort of lighting will do true justice to when you actually see it and believe it, that the Switch OLED screen is worth in a lot of ways the price of admission. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite things about the PS Vita, and I'm so happy to see more people experiencing that greatness with another, I guess, handheld console, although it's a console hybrid. Certain games that are very colorful got a new lease on life. I tried some more obscure ones like Nick All-Stars Brawl. I also went over to Cruisin' Blast, which is a recently released N64 classic series returning now with its arcade version retooled for the Nintendo Switch. It's incredible this game exists, but absolutely 100% one of the most colorful games to release this year. So this was a really good test run, pardon the pun, for the Nintendo Switch OLED to see how much the color splash really was affected here, and it is tremendous. I think Cruisin' Blast, if anything, can sell people on the Nintendo Switch OLED screen just by itself. It's absolutely incredible looking, and again, gives a new lease on life to some of these games that you already had on your shelf, because it's fun just to see what's more colorful. It's as simple as that. But for some people, that's not enough. There is a different dock here, and it is worth talking about because there are some new things included in it. You see, Nintendo finally caught up with the 2000s. They've included an Ethernet port. Yes, really. The original Xbox had one. Nintendo never had one on their Switch dock. This Switch dock does have an Ethernet port. As someone who has had an original Switch for a very long time and has suffered from the weak wireless adapter within it, seeing an Ethernet port there is such a sight to behold, and a welcome one at that. For me personally, the download speeds were so much more improved, and that's important because the internal memory is much bigger for the Nintendo Switch. So downloadable content, downloading your games, there's much more you can squeeze on there. The original Switch and all of its other renditions would boast 32 gigabytes, whereas the new Switch OLED gives you 64 gigabytes of built-in memory. But again, Nintendo catching up in the 2000s, they added Bluetooth audio. This is something that was included in a brand new update, so this is not exclusive to the OLED like I had seen it been reported multiple times. One of the more significant features added as well is a much more sturdier kickstand. I remember when I first got my original Nintendo Switch and they had that flimsy piece of plastic there designed to hold up your entire console, and I remember when I leaned up against it, it broke off. And I thought I had broke my console day one because I was testing it out and I was freaking out. It's designed to disconnect, and I was like, oh my God, this thing was that flimsy. Still, it couldn't even hold the console. Now it is a full-on kickstand across the entire length of the console, excluding the Joy-Cons. This was really awesome to see because it actually makes the kickstand something you could use. One weird complaint I do have about the new Nintendo Switch OLED is how the dock unclips. So in the original Switch dock, it was on a hinge and it would open and close, while this one just pops off. The reason I don't like this is because I can see this being a situation where people are traveling and they forget to clip the dock part back on, or it accidentally falls off. I feel like that's just way too likely to occur. Not only that, but again, I don't know why this isn't on a hinge. If these companies cut costs somehow, it's beyond me, but just another nitpick I did want to call out here. Another thing I just wanted to touch on, because I don't know how many folks are like me, I like to collect games, as you'll see on this channel, as you've already seen. But when it comes to something along the lines of Joy-Cons, which I see a lot of YouTubers love to collect, love to highlight, they love to mess around with Amazon versions of them, and I'm sure we'll do that at some point on this channel. I did not know what it was like to get a fresh pair of Joy-Cons because I've had mine since the launch of the Nintendo Switch. I thought they were heinously overpriced. And on top of all that, even though I had drift, some isopropyl alcohol consistently fixed my issues, so I really never saw an issue to reinvest. Let me just tell you, clicking on some brand new Joy-Cons and feeling them out, I get it a little bit now. I get it. It felt really nice to have something that wasn't as, we'll say, suppressed as my old Switch Joy-Cons. And so that was really nice to see. The triggers were much more responsive and not clicked down as much. The face buttons were much more responsive. It was overall a very refreshing experience. The analog sticks were tighter, but again, Nintendo has yet to really fully address the drift issue. They just offered to replace them, but this seems to be something along an issue with the actual design of the Joy-Cons from the overuse of them. But again, this was nice just to have a sweet new pair of Joy-Cons and experience all of that. One thing I thought was interesting is despite the LAN port that was included, they didn't include something along the lines of a Ethernet cable. That's provided separately. You have to go get it on your own. So there is nothing in the box supporting these brand new features, but otherwise it is a standard Nintendo Switch. And again, for the third time, I just like to emphasize in this video, you gotta be a handheld gamer to dig this. So is it worth it? Is it worth the $350 to upgrade? To answer that, again, you have to look at yourself and say, do I love handheld gaming this much? If you really are like me, where I think the Game Boy Advance SP was the best system of all time. I adore that console. I love handheld gaming. It brings me back to a special time, but I think there's still a place for it. And I do love that Nintendo still has heart for that, where even their newest console is a hybrid of handheld and console gaming. So for me, it seemed like over time where I thought this was stupid, I don't like this, and I mainly got it to show it off here on the channel, I did think to myself, you know what, I love handheld gaming enough where this is worth it. But if you are not in that very niche group of people, please pocket your money. It's almost like a remaster, if you will, of the Switch. This isn't a full-on remake like some have talked about with a Nintendo Switch Pro, which could support 4K gaming, 60 FPS, like many people have been crossing their fingers for. And of course, those retrospective updates that would give the Switch and those games like Hyrule Warriors that drop below 30 frames all the time a new lease on life. So for me personally, I think it's a very hard recommendation for those who don't have extra income sitting around and aren't handheld gamers. If it's just going to be a toy that you tinker around with for an hour or so, don't waste your money. If you're not a handheld gamer, don't waste your money. But if you do love handheld gaming, this isn't something you got to rush out and do right away. I don't think it's flying off of store shelves. I've seen people writing all over online that they just happened upon them in stores like Target and Walmart, and they were just sitting there. So you do have some time to make a decision, but just know with Black Friday coming up, with Christmas coming up, you're going to have to make your decision shortly. Otherwise, if you're playing the patient game, which I always recommend with new hardware, if you're not in the content creation space, you don't need to be testing this stuff out immediately for issues like Joy-Con drift, or like we showed in our last video, PlayStation 5's eating up your disc. You can wait. Just know that. I know it's easy to get FOMO. It's easy to want to be a part of all the hype online, but you can wait and you won't regret it. But if you do love handheld gaming, this is a fun upgrade, and I have been enjoying it quite a bit, and it has gotten me using my Switch more. But nothing will be more impactful than more power under the hood that allows me to play certain games that have dropped below 30 FPS consistently at maybe something above that. So those are my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch OLED. Have you adopted this console early like I have? If so, let me know down below. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts. Other than that, thank you so much for tuning in to the latest Retro Rebound, and I'll catch you all with our next video. Peace out.